about critical issues of our time, and so it's great that you come, and also great that our faculty in the School of Education puts this on. So welcome, and thank you so much.
Well, you did some great work on those questions, and I think what we'll do is have first Sue come up, and then Rochelle, to sort of summarize, and we've lumped together a couple of the questions because they were a little bit overlapping, but very, very sharp questions. I thought that one of the things that I might ask Sue that didn't appear in the questions was to give us a little bit of insight into the national political landscape in regard to Smarter Balance and the Common Core, and just help us kind of understand how Maine fits into that broader context, and then you're on your own.
Okay. So I was sharing with Patrick that I was just asked recently to do a webinar for Scholastic, and in my analysis, 25 states who adopted the Common Core have now renamed them, Maine being one of them, so that Common Core is not in the language at all. And many of those states have tried to change the conversation to college and career standards because they have become just such a hot political issue. 2 states, Oklahoma and Indiana, have repealed and are completely revamping the standards right now. So Indiana has already rewritten their standards and adopted those. Oklahoma is just beginning that process. We have several other states. South Carolina has passed legislation to repeal. They're going to go through a rewrite process. North Carolina, the political environment there is such that I think you're going to see them repealed in North Carolina as well. Once we get through the gubernatorial elections, I think you're going to see things settle one way or another. The difficulty that states are having is that most, like us, many of you probably don't know Maine's journey for Common Core, but we were at the table. We helped to create. Folks in the department convened teacher input along the way, and we were one of 3 states when we took Common Core to the Education Committee and to the state board. We were one of 3 states that actually had the legislature adopt the Common Core, and we had a unanimous vote when they were passed originally. And so, but we've lost legislators, we've lost the history, that turnover, that political dynamic. So I think you're going to see, what I think you'll see happen is we're going to, the pendulum is going to swing. What brought us to the table in 2005, 2006, the Fordham Foundation did an analysis of state standards and state assessments. They established criteria, and they gave states an A to an F. Many states got Fs and Ds. We actually got C's on the Maine learning results at the time. And I can remember Governor Baldacci called me and he said, "Sue, what's going on? How come we got a C?" And you know, a lot of it was around clarity. It was around that developmental progression of the standards. Was it clear what came first, what came next? And so there was good feedback that brought us to the table. And then what I shared with you earlier tonight, the comparability question. Every state really thought about assessment and standards. I think what's going to happen, Patrick, I think the pendulum is going to swing. We're going to have this mix. We're going to have Fordham Foundation, Ed Trust, other watchdog type institutions. 2 years from now, when the test results come out and states are back to their own cut scores, right now we have 9 states who have withdrawn from the consortium. We have 4 states that never adopted the Common Core. So we're going to be about, Smarter Balance has actually maintained its membership. It's much stronger than PARC. PARC has a much more volatile political environment in the states that are in PARC. So I think we'll continue with our nucleus. We'll be able to move forward, but our groups will be slightly smaller. And I think that pendulum around comparability, depending on the elections and state legislatures, November will be a key. factor to know exactly where we're going. But 25 states have stayed the course, they just changed the name. So I've got a series of questions. I also had some feedback on the Today's Meet, and a couple of things. So there was a question about, would Smarter Balance create a next-gen science assessment? That is not in the plan right now. So Smarter Balance, as we go forward, we were created as a consortia of states. And Smarter had a lengthy conversation, exploration, as to whether or not they would create a 501c3, become affiliated with a university. And so Smarter has decided to affiliate with UCLA Crest. We felt that it was important to be affiliated with the university, to be affiliated with a research organization that could help us to keep pushing at what could we do. I think before, Smarter needs to see how well the ELA and the math assessments, the consortia was formed to create only ELA and math. Most states have taken a much slower approach to the next-gen science standards because of the volatility around the ELA and math. Smarter will continue to assess its membership as to what should be created. So some of the states would like end-of-course assessments for high school because many of our members states are required to have end-of-course, and they don't want to have to create those independent for ELA and for math. We get requests to create a K2 assessment. So I think you're going to see the consortia will focus on ELA and math, but the states will drive that decision based on the members as they go forward. Even though we're affiliated with UCLA, the member states will decide the direction based on what states are asking for. I also had a note from Mary Lou that we shouldn't be making decisions about text solely on Lexile. And I totally agree with Mary Lou. There's 3 pieces that you should be making decisions around text selection. It's the qualitative conversation. And that qualitative conversation, we have rubrics that you can use to assess what's the purpose, what's the language, what is the knowledge demand. So a whole set of criteria that is really at the heart of the conversation. Is that text appropriate for that grade level? Does it move the bar for rigorous? A way to help to check is to use Lexiles or one of the other. The Flesch-Kincaid is another tool that Smarter Balance is using. So you should use 2 of those quantitative measures. And then the third element of text complexity is reader and task. So what do we know about our kids? What interest? What captures their attention? What do we know about their reading skills and ability? So if you look at this 3-legged triangle, those are the key pieces that Smarter's using. Common Core suggests that you use, not just the Lexile, but it's a quantitative tool that that we will be using. How do you recommend we use Smarter Balance for teacher evaluation of student growth with the pre and post design? So Smarter has not recommended that you use it in that fashion. That's a state policy. And so lots of times we get questions for Smarter Balance. So what is the direction? Can it or will it do X, Y, and Z? Smarter has created an assessment bank. They will do a series of research studies as we go forward, thus our affiliation with Crest. And this is probably one that will get pushed, but it's an individual state decision. And it's also one of the things that I would caution you on. Rochelle shared with you that the interim bank of items will be available in December. That interim bank is not a secure bank of items. It is designed to give your students the opportunity to interact. There's 2 kinds. There's the clone to the summative. So if you wanted to benchmark, to look at, if you need to ask key questions, why are you using it? Are you using it to look at curriculum instruction? Are you using it to inform your instruction? Are you trying to do progress monitoring to see where kids are, to look at growth? But it is not a secure test bank. It does not have sufficient items in it at this moment, because one of the things that Maine, New Hampshire, West Virginia, there was about 19 of the states who came together and said, we really want to be able to look at proficiency. Should we be looking at the summative assessment, or could the interim assessments help us to build multiple pieces of evidence to document proficiency? So the hope is that as that interim bank gets larger, it's not large enough right now to have the diversity of items that you're going to want to be able to document student growth and student evidence. Because when you use those interim items, kids may see the same item again. And then there's going to be these interim blocks. So the interim blocks are, there'll be 5 to 7 that you'll be able to use as you select and desire to measure a collection of standards. Again, as you use those interim blocks, kids may see an item repeated. So it's down the road further before we could do that. So it's a state decision. We did not design Smarter Balance for teacher eval. It was a requirement of the federal guidelines that it has to be valid and reliable for measuring student progress and to measure growth. How that then gets interpreted would be a state or local decision. Okay? This is just a clarification around the digital library. The processes and tools, teachers from Maine helped to create it. It's available to all of you, but the focus is 3, 8, and 11. But many of what you'll see, there are vignettes, there's video, there's samples. They're applicable to many grades, but they are targeted. How was the reliability, validity of the Smarter Balance test determined? And given the promise of delivering critical analytical thinkers, or is this a big research project designed can't read it. Gather data. Gather data. All right. So one of the things, several things have been happening with Smarter Balanced in our journey to create it. We first started with cognitive labs. We brought kids, teachers, educators in, and this was the first step. And we put items in front of kids. And we got feedback from kids, we got feedback from teachers, what worked, how did the technology work. We were testing size of screen, did the kids need separate keyboards. We did comprehensive analysis around the items, alignment to the standards, and we had ongoing researchers. So AIR, who has the state contract, key partner, ETS, CTV McGraw, Measured Progress, who else am I forgetting? But there was one of the things that Smarter did is they said, we're not going to have one test company create this. We want experts in the types of assessment. So performance assessment, not all testing companies had that expertise. So we required the vendor to enter into partnership. So in most cases, we had 5 to 6 vendors working in partnership on all the pieces. So we did the cognitive labs. We then did field tests where we tested items. We had our technical advisors. We have a technical advisory committee of national testing experts, also experts in ELL, special ed, and constantly looking at the construct, the data, the information. So we had a smaller field test. And then we did the pilot. We had over 7 million students participate in the pilot last year. And from that, we've gone through comprehensive analysis. The next critical piece is all of that data is going to help us to look at our cut scores, but also the reliability factors. And so there's our psychometricians. Smarter's also going to, once we administer the official test next year, there will be several longitudinal studies. So one of those longitudinal studies will be alignment to the SAT, ACT, and this is not my area of expertise, so Rochelle, you may want to add a little bit more around the molecular validity pieces.
Oh, okay. I think I probably have as much knowledge as you do
Okay,
at this
so
point.
who specifically, what professional groups was consulted when determining which skills students should be proficient in by each grade level? So it was teachers, it was content specialists, it was higher education, we had business partners at the table when the Common Core was created. And then when we identified the targets, we went through a similar process. Smarter actually had two conversations. So the achievement level descriptors, higher ed, and K-12 teachers came to the table, and the standards were aligned already, but describing what that would look like was a process that required both groups to agree. And in fact, in every one of our states, the state departments voted and higher ed voted on what that was going to look like. So it was a cross-section of experts across the country who helped to do that. Smarter also brought business roundtable, CTE directors to help us to look at, so what are those skills for career readiness as well? And there's a great resource document on the website. What are your thoughts about how many times a student needs to demonstrate mastery or proficiency of a standard before being ready to show mastery on the Smarter Balanced Assessment? Good question. I'm not positive. You know, one of the things that we did here in Maine with Maine Learning Results back, goodness, Patrick, Rochelle, this is
A while back.
a while back here. So 2005, 6, we worked with Bob Marzano, and we asked Bob to come in and help us to answer this very question. And one of the things that we kept looking at was it 5, 6 consistent demonstrations that students. So I don't know that it's when kids are ready for Smarter Balance. I think it's a bigger question. When are they ready to move on in your classrooms? So that you have seen in a variety of different settings that students are ready. Shouldn't just be ready for the assessment, it's ready for the next piece of learning is how I would phrase that. What about the students who do not have access to technology and are not tech savvy? Are we discriminating against them? So, you know, one of the things, if we look at the data, and we've gathered a lot of data, and Rochelle was right, Maine is way ahead of most states. Most of our schools, and I think back to our deployments from the middle schools and the percent, the technology accessibility in your schools. I don't know what the current numbers are, but in Maine schools, we were almost 5 to 1. And that was 4 years ago when I left the department. So I would question what's happening here, that would be an issue for kids. And we need to get our kids in front of the technology. The test is online. Someone also asked what kind of skills you're going to need for your third graders to be able to interact with the assessment. Use the practice test. And if you go in, there's guidelines. How do you drag and drop? How do you highlight? What are the listening tools? How do you enlarge the font? There's lots of resources built in. Get your kids in front of the computers. Get your parents in front of the computers so that kids can, in fact. We did a study with David Silvernail back in 2005-06, when in the middle school we went online for assessments, and those of you who were around at that time, it was not pretty. We had lots of issues. And so one of the things we ultimately did is we gave you a choice. We said paper, pencil, or the technology. And David studied both groups and helped to look at the research. We actually found that when kids are exposed to technology, they use the technology, they score higher than doing the paper pencil. They were more willing to go back and do the editing, to do the planning, and so forth. National Assessment of Educational Progress has found the same thing. They've monitored, because NAEP is now also digital, and what they have found tracking across the country, the kids are scoring higher when using the digital tools. So, there might be a lot of reasons for that, but I think we have to also make sure we're getting our kids exposed and having the opportunities. I think back to Seymour Papert when he was advising us, Governor King, and Maine was looking at one-to-one plan for technology. And Seymour used to say to Governor King, it's not the technology, it's the learning. And our kids need to be able to have the technology at their fingertips. So I would challenge us all. Most of the places I work in now, they don't have the budgets to do what we've done in Maine. So they're looking at bring your own devices, making sure there's equity of access. So instead of purchasing for everybody, the schools are making sure the low socioeconomic families get to have technology. And they're working out the partnerships in different ways. So I encourage you to look and see how you can. And one of our districts here, I'm trying to remember which one, actually did K-12 one-to-one and did a fabulous job building supports for families to have access. How will Smarter manage hand scoring? Similar to what we used to do in Maine. We're going to bring educators to the table. And typically 2 educators will score. If there's a disparity in the scoring, there's a third-party arbitrator. When we did this in Maine, it was the best PD we could have done. And so Smarter has built into the cost of the program the hand scoring until artificial intelligence gets sophisticated enough for us to be able to gather that information. Rochelle.
All righty. Okay. Well, I'll try to handle some of the easy ones first and then save the longer ones for closer to the end. I'm cognizant of the time. The first one is, what is the official name of the SBAC? What will it be called? And we're not sure, to be honest. Right now, we're calling it the Maine Assessment Program. We're a little worried about that acronym because it has some familiarity to things some of us remember from before. Not that that was a bad thing, but we're really trying to look, and in fact, I was discussing this with Charlene Tucker, who's our Assessment and Accountability Coordinator. She's new to the department, but a name I'm sure you'll be hearing more from. But remember, Maine has a comprehensive assessment system. And so while this new test that's going to be coming will be assessing our math and ELA, it will also be providing the digital library and the interim pieces. It is a program with many components. We also have, as part of Maine's comprehensive assessment program, our English language proficiency exam, which is the WIDA Access that many of our ELA students take every year. We also have the alternate. So we're trying to think of a way that will certainly identify this assessment easily for folks, but doesn't add to the confusion. And I think the question around the science and the being a part was another reason why we're trying to be considerate of that, because we also have a science assessment that is for 5, 8, and 11, and so that's the MEA science. So when you look at our testing schedule, you have a whole smorgasbord of different names for tests. So again, we're trying to think of ways that we can identify all of them easily for folks. Maybe I'll throw it out and one of you has a really creative idea that will help us. Is Smarter Balance going to work on the MLTI iPads? Yes. And if you go to the Smarter Balance website, one of the links that they have there, which is very informative, will list for you all of the different platforms and operating systems that the assessment will work with. There has been considerable attention given to all the different platforms that might be across the country, because remember, while Maine certainly has a history of working with different Apple products, that doesn't mean that that's the only source we have in Maine. We have a number of schools that are using other machines, and again, across the country there's a variety. So as the development was happening, there was a real consideration, but all along the way we have listed all of the platforms on the Smarter Balance website, so you can certainly go on and take a look and compare that to what you have at your school. I will tell you that our technology folks have been doing ongoing surveys throughout this process, and all the information that you provided for us says that you have what's going to be needed. So we're fairly confident in that, and of course all along the way, as I've said before, if there's a place that you're concerned about, give us a call. We'll have a chat and see what we can do to allay your fears or get you the information you need. Will juniors be doing Smarter Balanced and SATs? Is that a local decision or a state decision? Are colleges prepared for the Smarter Balanced data instead of SAT data, if that's how it will be? That is a great question. And I would invite all of you to go to the newsroom and put in there high school assessments. There is an article about optional, and I'm going to underscore that, optional assessments for this year. All of our third year high school students are required to take Maine's new assessment. That is our required state summative assessment. However, we recognize that this is a transitional year. Some of the conversations that were referenced in this question are happening as we speak with our higher ed partners. And so to assist in that transition, Maine opted to pay for some of the assessments that you've been providing for our high school students. And so we are providing Ready Step at 9th grade, PSAT at 10th grade, and either the SAT or AccuPlacer at 11th grade. Maine is picking up the tab on that, and it's optional for any students that want to take it. There is information on our website about that, and then if you have any additional questions, please feel free to give us a call. But we have a number of schools that have taken that option. But it was one way that again, we could be considerate of this transition. We knew that there was some angst around the change of having the SAT in place and then now shifting to a new assessment and what that might mean for our students that were looking at their college and career goals. So hopefully that will assist. We had a question about what was happening with the newly appointed panel or commission charged with reviewing the adequacy of Maine standards. I want to clarify that and tell you that the purpose of the standards review panel is to look at and assess or determine the clarity. How clear are they for teachers? How clear are they for teachers to be able to explain to students? How clear are they for teachers to be able to explain to parents? How clear are they for teachers to understand what is expected? And the rigor. Are they rigorous enough to help students move on and be prepared for that next level, for post-secondary or careers or whatever? That's the goal of this review panel. Now, if you go to our website, you'll see that there's an opportunity for folks to weigh in around clarity and rigor on the website and offer some feedback that is being shared with the group. So that's the goal of that group, and the purpose is we're going to use their feedback to inform some of our work later on in this year. We want to be able to put in a proposal to add the Maine's college and career ready standards that are currently in Chapter 131 into Chapter 132. And so in order to do that, again, that is a legislative process, and we'll have some public discussion later down the road, but we really want to get some initial feedback from this group. The goal has always been, as Sue pointed out earlier, to have rigorous standards that were relevant, and we believe that these standards do that. But we know that there's also been a lot of questions, some concern, and so we want to give this committee, this panel, a chance to review them, and also, again, the public a chance to weigh in on those two things. So I think that might answer that question. The next one is it possible that the state would opt out of providing either or both the interim or formative tools in future years? I can't predict the future, but I would say I would hope that your voice is as loud as mine. As an educator, I know how critical it is to have all of those components. They all provide information around instruction and supporting students. So I really believe that they'll become an integral part of the work that we do. And I think that if there was a suggestion that they wouldn't, I would hope your voices would rise and help people understand just how important they are. And then the other question I had was, what resources and funding will be provided to support teachers and students to eliminate the dip that is to come this spring? I think Sue shared a number of things that we're hoping that schools are already putting in place, and if not, that they will be putting in place. So that's not necessarily, those are some resources that she shared, but if you go to the website, under either one of the content areas, either under mathematics or English language arts, you will find that our content specialists have provided a number of resources. There are not only websites that contain other ideas that you might access, but there are also links to some webinars where they are breaking down the standards a little bit, talking about those claims and things that we heard about earlier, so that this may be something that could prompt some discussions, some PLCs at your school. So those are readily available. So we're trying to have those there. And then as we're working with the folks in the department and working on our regional work, we have some different things like Dine and Discuss and other professional development opportunities. And in all of the things that we're working on, we're trying to model for you the same things that we're hoping you're doing, and that you're doing them all together. So we're not looking at the implementation of standards over here and preparing for an assessment over here and working on educator effectiveness over here. They're all together. And so in all of the work that we're doing, we've really made a concerted effort at the department to collaborate and coordinate across teams. So many of you may have attended some of the workshops and things that have happened recently. You'll see department staff, special ed staff, and content area folks together at the same workshop. Our focus is that this is for all kids. And some of them may happen to be special education students, and they happen to be English learners, and they all need strategies. All students have needs and need strategies for support. So again, all of our resources, we're trying to make them available on the website, trying to provide them through the course of the year. Again, I would invite you to ensure that you're following the newsroom. Anytime something is coming up, we post it there, and there's a professional development calendar as well. As far as funding, I know that in some of your local budgets, from EPS, there's already some funding in there for professional development. But you may also want to talk to the folks that are doing your federal funding. I know that Title II provides funding for almost every district in this state, and that can be used for professional development, and many districts are using that as well. Title I also provides funding for professional development, and some of our districts have moved to having schools that have what we would call a school-wide program, which means that the professional development and support can be for the entire school, not just for certain teachers or folks within the building. You also have some smaller rural districts that might have some REAP funding or Title VI funding. That's funding directed at those rural school districts. So there's another avenue where you can have some funding to support what you're doing. So again, tap into your federal program folks and take a look and see how they're using your funding, and ask if that can be redirected at some of your professional development and support needs. And then the last question was, given the importance and context of rolling out initiatives effectively and the importance of this initiative succeeding, what was the thinking behind pushing the Smarter Balance through without a longer transition period of adjustment for students and teachers? I would sort of argue we've given a pretty good transition period. The standards were adopted in 2011. There was an expectation that they be fully implemented last year. And so in that time, we have tried, the folks at the department have tried to support a number of professional development activities to support the implementation of those standards. We also participated in a pilot test, so schools all across the state could have opted to do that. We also had the test this spring, and we made it so that any school that wanted to participate could. We had a minimum number that we had to provide as a state and a member of the Smarter Balance Consortium, but we had indicated that we would be willing to support any school that wanted to support, to participate in the test this spring. And in fact, we had a number of schools beyond what we needed to have who did participate. So those were some options where people could have just had a preview of what was to come, and we got good feedback from that. And then, as we've said a number of times, the practice test is available. So I was a fourth grade teacher. I can tell you I brought that down and took a number of those items just to see how they were, and we would invite you to do that in your classrooms and share that. So again, I think there's some opportunities. That is my last question. So.
Thank you. One question that wasn't asked was, how quickly will the results come back?
Oh, okay. Well, the maximum amount of time is 30 days.
Maximum, 30 days.
30 days.
Wow.
And what will have an influence on that will be the amount of time for the hand scoring. We are talking with the Smarter Balance folks about ways to get you the data from the CAT, the Computer Adaptive Test, as quickly as possible. The thing that we want to be sure that people recognize is it's not the complete assessment. So, you know, we don't want to send out a message of how students did on a portion and have people make an assumption about how students did, and then there's another piece of it coming. But many of us who are in this development process, who were former teachers and made good use of that data to inform our instruction and to plan for the following year, have really been pushing at trying to get this data back to you as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Michelle.
Welcome.
Couple of quick closing comments. When the question was posed, are we going to be able to ensure all students meet the standards? What's going to be required, the resources, to be able to do that? One of our upcoming Dine and Discuss topics for later in the year will be promising practices around questions of that nature. How do we get all of our kids to the level of proficiency that we're defining for them these days? So we'll keep you posted on that agenda as that gets closer. Did want to remind everybody to make sure that you're on our mailing list. I want to thank Anita for all of the hard work that she did in preparing for us tonight. And of course, we could not have done it without Sue Gendron and Rochelle Tome. Thank you so much for the presentation. We'll keep you posted on our events. We hope to see superintendents at our superintendents meetings, principals at our principals meetings, and I hope we get this kind of a turnout at all of our Dine and Discuss events throughout the coming year. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
May I ask you a question? Am I on tape?
Yes, you are. Everything is going to be.